Let's talk about heavyweights. Let's talk about the British heavyweights, and let's start talking predominantly about Moses Itauma. I mean, obviously you've got skin in the game. You've got Dave Allen in your camp. You will be watching Itauma. Potentially, he could be an opponent for Dave Allen. Who knows? But what's your take on this kid? There's a whole hype train going with him. It seems to be merited.
Yeah.
But what was your reaction to his performance against Dillian White?
Yeah, I don't think you can say he's put a foot wrong so far. I think everything he's been asked of him up until this point, he's done it with flying colours. Tremendous puncher. His timing, he's very, very good for such a young guy. He seems really mature, and I think everyone was expecting Dillian White to be the one who's going to sort of push him and give him that test, and at least put him in the back foot, put him under pressure, give him rounds. And unfortunately, that just didn't happen. And I know there is a few rumours going around that Dillian was injured.
Knock,
yeah, but nevertheless, he got rid of him exactly how you would want him to do if he was your fighter. So
I mean, the noise was accelerated. Spencer was part of the cheerleading campaign for it, and other people were suggesting that there's a lot should be taken from that performance. I don't mean to be mean-spirited. I haven't laced up gloves, so I'm careful to some extent what I say. But can you take the Dillian White performance with a pinch of salt, because he was put in there as a credential, a resume building win? Dillian to me was miles off, and Dillian was pushing back against the narrative of all the so-called experts, you so-called experts.
Yeah.
Well, so-called experts were right, because Dillian got dealt with inside the first round. He looked to me like someone that wasn't mentally prepared or engaged anymore when he came into the ring. Can you take the Dillian White performance as a real benchmark, or slightly as a pinch of salt?
I think there's lots of different factors there as well. I think one of them is inactivity. He looked like he'd lost a lot of weight as well, Dillian.
He did.
And there's been a lot of controversy around his career leading up until that point, and then so age comes into it. I think if Dillian carries on, and then we see what sort of form he has after this, then that would be a little bit of a better indication on whether sort of Moses Itauma is that guy who people potentially think he is, or whether he's just got Dillian White at the right time.
Before the fight, Ben Davison, Moses' trainer, was talking about the fight with White. Let's have a listen to what Ben had to say.
He's a special talent, and he's not the type of fighter where you need to look at guys and go, oh, we need to try and catch him at the right time. He's good enough to compete with any of them at any point.
What Ben's saying there is that he's a special talent. He can go in with anybody. He doesn't have to worry about who he's going in with. Do you think that's ballsy from Ben, either one of you, in terms of, you think it's a bit previous, or do you think it's the right kind of messaging?
No, look, Moses has had to deal with a lot of emotional pressure going into that last fight with Dillian White. When we're looking,
you mean expectation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. For a young kid, with that on his shoulders, I think he come through with flying colours. Whether Dillian was at his best or he wasn't at his best, that remains to be seen, as you said, Jamie. But I think when we look at it, you just look at what that kid done to Dillian. You go, well, Ben knows better than anyone else, because he's in the gym with him day in, day out. He sees him spar, and he spars with big names as well. He's got that experience. He's been doing that for a long time, for the last 5 years, going back to Lawrence Okoli when he was 15. Yeah. So he will know that if he's got something special or not. He's an experienced trainer. He's a good trainer. So, no, I'm not surprised by him saying that. He will know when to let him off the leash. He needs a couple of more fights before he's rewarded that world title fight.
That's the question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask you, Jamie, because obviously when you say you can go in with anyone, I understand that you guys have the eyes and the expertise and you know what you're looking at, but until someone's put in a situation, really put in that situation, surely you can't know what they're going to do and how good they're going to be when they come up against someone that's a level above the fighters that they fought against.
Absolutely not.
So when they're talking about running him in against Caballero, or putting him in against Joseph Parker, or or Alexander Usyk, surely that's a tad previous, and he perhaps needs a fight in the middle of that, someone that maybe like
a few fights,
a Lawrence Okoli or some of that nature.
No, and I'm not saying that Ben Davison's not right in what he's saying. Is he believes if he puts him in there, he could beat those fighters. I don't believe he doesn't think that. I think he does believe that. And the facts of the matter is, when a fighter is that good, is that talented, you have the good problems, but the big problems are getting them experience. Because when they punch like he does,
no one wants to fight him.
I'm having a similar problem with Pat Brown now,
right?
Because we need to make sure. I feel like he could potentially be fighting some of the best cruiserweights in the world right now and beat them, but we don't want to run before we can walk, and we need to make sure he gets the right type of experience, so that in 12, 18 months time or whenever it is, he takes that step up. He's got those
We'll
rounds
talk
under his
about
belt.
Pat later on the show, but let's relate it to Moses Itauma.
So in my opinion, I think Ben Davison's right. I think he feels like he could be any heavyweight in the world now. It's a massive risk going into any fight like that without having those rounds under your belt where you've come through adversity, a few bad rounds where, you know, mentally. So, because there's so many aspects to make a fighter good. It's not just about him being able to blast people out. You know, can he weather a storm? Has he got composure?
Absolutely.
Is his temperament good enough to go into the longer rounds?
Absolutely.
You know, is his conditioning
But
good?
will you know that, Jamie, by seeing him fight against what he's fought, and by seeing him in the training with you, in sparring and in camp? Do you, as a trainer, do you have the radar for all those things to potentially say, if I were to bet on that, that's the outcome I think would manifest itself?
Yeah, I'd say 90% of the stuff you can cover up until the point when you're actually in the fight.
Yeah.
There's certain elements where, and it's really temperament. You know, under the spotlight, on the night, under pressure, 20,000 fans, you know, baiting for blood, and you're under the cosh and you've lost 3 rounds on the bounce. How do you respond to that? And they're the questions. You know, once he's put into that position, then they'll be able to answer it. You can't answer that sparring, not under pressure, in 18-ounce gloves with head guards on. It's a very different situation.
Does your nose tell you that the way that Moses looks, because his categorically does, and most people's does, and Gareth A. Davis was talking to me the other day, suggesting, and of course Moses said, "Well, thank you very much, Gareth," that this was the blueprint was set. This is the way this kid's going. Does your nose tell you that everything that we see in front of us will lead us to the conclusion that this boy is going to win a world title and he's going to do it in short order?
I do believe that. I don't think that it will be a massive surprise if there's some bumps along the way, in terms of something like the David A situation, where at some point it comes up against somebody
when he was in the
like
cruisers.
Carl Thompson, where, you know, there's those problems there, and you go, whoa, we've ran a little bit before we can walk. But in all honesty, he might not. He might come through those with flying colours, and then we go, this kid is the real deal. He is the next Mike Tyson. But, you know, from a coach's point of view, I'd rather safeguard it and make sure he gets those rounds under his belts before.
The problem that he has, though, and it's a good problem as well, that he's now WBO number 1, and you've got like the people that will give him rounds are people like Philip Hrgovic, you know, your Andy Ruiz Jr., your Cabiel, all those guys. But you are up in that level then. And the problem he's got is because he's WBO number 1, and we don't know what's going to happen with the belts, whether they're going to fragment, whether Usyk's going to let that WBO go. He may be forced into boxing for the WBO world title next against, let's say, Joseph Parker, who's the interim champion, or if Parker decides to go somewhere else, he gets Hrgovic. So all of a sudden he's in that position. And it may be sooner than they wanted, but they do believe in him, and so it could happen sooner rather than later.
Once you set that step up, there's no coming back then. And that's it. So,
and I think that was Frank's worry.
And maybe he's already in that position. You know, if we're talking that he's the number 1 contender now, then if that fight comes around, so say tomorrow morning we wake up and Alexander Usyk's give all the belts up, he's going to be pushed forward as mandatory challenger.
Would you take it as a trainer? There you go. That's probably a better way to phrase it. If you was looking after him now,
if I wasn't going to be willing to take it, I wouldn't have got him to this point where he was mandatory challenger. I would have been saying to whoever the manager is. So if in my fight, Sam Jones manages most of them, I'd be saying to Sam, listen, let's just slow down now for 6-9 months, get him some experience, because I don't want him to be mandatory yet. We'd have slowed it down a little bit more, But they must be confident in his ability.
Well, look, I mean, it's a wonderful thing to have such a talent on our radar, and so we'll look at it with fascination.